The dust from the stranger's horse hadn't even settled when Zelda Whitmore felt her heart lurch sideways in her chest, watching him dismount outside the saloon with movements that spoke of too many miles and not enough rest. It was the spring of 1878, and Fairplay, Colorado had seen its share of drifters pass through on their way to better fortunes or running from worse pasts. Zelda stood on the wooden walkway outside her brother's office, a basket of mending balanced against her hip, and told herself she had no business staring at a strange man like some schoolgirl. At 23 years old, she had learned to be practical about men, especially the kind who rolled into town with everything they owned tied to a saddle. But there was something about the way he moved, careful and quiet, that made her pause. He was tall, built lean and strong like someone who had worked hard all his life and expected to keep working until his bones gave out. Dark hair fell past his collar, dusty from the road, and when he turned his face toward the late afternoon sun, she caught a glimpse of sharp features softened by exhaustion. "Stop gawking," she muttered to herself, shifting the basket and turning toward the general store. Her brother Thomas would give her an earful if he caught her showing interest in some nameless cowboy. As the sheriff of Fairplay, Thomas took his protective duties seriously, especially where his younger sister was concerned. Never mind that Zelda could shoot straighter than half the men in town and had been running their household since their mother passed 6 years ago. The cowboy's horse, a sturdy roan that had seen better days, stood with its head hanging low. Zelda paused mid-step. The animal was favoring its left front leg, and even from here she could see the slight tremble in its flanks. Her practical nature warred with her curiosity for all of 3 seconds before she crossed the dusty street, her skirts swishing around her boots. "Your horse needs tending," she said without preamble as she approached. The cowboy turned, and up close he was younger than she had first thought, maybe 26 or 27, with gray eyes that held the kind of weariness that came from seeing too much. He pulled off his hat, revealing hair that would probably be a nice dark brown once it saw soap and water. "I know it, miss," he said, his voice low and rough. "Been looking for a stable. This where I might find one." His manners were good despite his appearance, and something in his face told her he was genuinely worried about the animal. Zelda softened slightly, pointing up the street. "2 blocks north on the left. Mr. Henderson runs it. Tell him Zelda Whitmore sent you, and that the roan needs a poultice for that foreleg, and at least 2 days of rest before you think about riding out again." The cowboy's expression shifted into something that might have been surprise. "You know horses." "I know when an animal is being pushed too hard," Zelda replied. "And I know that if you try to ride out tomorrow, you'll end up walking the rest of wherever you are going and probably putting that horse down. Henderson is fair on prices if you are straight with him." He studied her for a long moment, those gray eyes taking in her face with an attention that made her acutely aware of the wisps of blonde hair that had escaped her braid, and the flour dust probably still on her cheek from this morning's baking. Then he put his hat back on and gave her a nod that held real respect. "Thank you, miss. I appreciate the guidance." He gathered his horse's reins gently, murmuring something soft to the animal. As he started to walk away, he paused and looked back. "Name's Dawson Young, and I am obliged for the kindness." Zelda watched him lead the limping horse up the street, something warm and complicated unfurling in her chest. "You are welcome, Mr. Young," she called after him. She did not see Thomas emerge from the jail until his shadow fell across her path. "Who was that?" her brother asked, his tone carrying that particular note of brotherly suspicion she knew too well. "Nobody," Zelda said, picking up her basket again. "Just a drifter passing through." Thomas grunted, his hand resting on the gun at his hip in that unconscious way he had developed since pinning on the sheriff's badge 3 years ago. He was a good man, her brother, but he saw threats in every stranger and had opinions about every unmarried man within 50 miles. None of them, according to Thomas, were good enough for his sister. "His horse is lame," Zelda added, starting toward the store again. "He will be here at least a few days." "Then I had better introduce myself," Thomas said. "Make sure he knows we run a peaceful town." Zelda rolled her eyes where her brother could not see. Fairplay was peaceful because it was too small and too far from the main routes to attract much trouble. The biggest excitement in the past month had been when old Mr. Peterson's pig got loose and terrorized the church social. She spent the rest of the afternoon trying not to think about Dawson Young and failing miserably. While she measured flour and sugar at the store, her mind conjured those gray eyes. While she hung laundry in the yard behind the small house she shared with Thomas, she wondered what brought a man to push his horse so hard. While she rolled out dough for the evening's biscuits, she caught herself looking out the window toward the main street more times than was reasonable. Thomas came home just before supper, hanging his gun belt on the peg by the door and settling into his chair with a tired sigh. At 29, he already had the weight of responsibility aging him beyond his years. Their father had been sheriff before him, killed in a shootout when Zelda was 16. Thomas had stepped into those boots without hesitation, and sometimes she wondered what he might have done with his life if duty had not claimed him so young. "That drifter is a quiet one," Thomas said as Zelda set a plate in front of him. "Polite, paid Henderson in advance for 3 days of boarding, says he is looking for work." Zelda's hand stilled for just a moment on the serving spoon. "Did he say what kind of work?" "Whatever is available." "Ranch hand, stable work, carpentry. Claims he can do most anything needed doing." Thomas cut into his roast beef, chewing thoughtfully. "Checked with the telegraph office. No wanted posters matching his description. No trouble following him that I could find." "That is good," Zelda said, keeping her voice neutral as she filled her own plate. "Then he is just a man down on his luck." Thomas looked at her, his brown eyes too knowing. "He is also the first man I have seen you look twice at since that fool banker's son left town with the widow Palmer." Heat flooded Zelda's cheeks. "I looked once, and only because his horse was injured. Do not make something out of nothing, Thomas." Her brother's expression softened. "I just worry about you, Zell. You spend too much time taking care of me and this house. You should be married by now with a home of your own." This was an old conversation, worn smooth by repetition. "I will marry when I find someone worth marrying," Zelda said. "Which, in case you have not noticed, is a rare commodity in Fairplay." "Fair enough," Thomas conceded. "Just do not get your hopes up about this one. Drifters drift. It is in their nature." Zelda nodded and changed the subject to the town council meeting scheduled for next week, but Thomas's words stayed with her through the evening. Drifters drift. She knew that, had known it the moment she saw Dawson Young sitting exhausted in his saddle. Whatever had brought him to Fairplay, he would leave again once he had enough money for supplies, and his horse was sound. The knowledge should have been enough to quell the flicker of interest in her chest. It was not. The next morning, Zelda walked to the general store as she did every Tuesday, carrying her list of supplies and a basket of eggs to trade. The spring air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of pine from the mountains that ringed the valley. Fairplay sat at over 9,000 feet elevation, which meant the winters were brutal and the summers blessedly mild. It was a hard land that bred hard people, but Zelda had been born to it and could not imagine living anywhere else. She was comparing prices on coffee when the door opened, and Dawson Young walked in the daylight streaming through the store's front windows, cleaned up and rested. He was handsome enough to make her forget what she was doing. He had shaved, revealing a strong jaw and the kind of face that would age well, all clean lines and honest features. His clothes were worn but freshly brushed, and he moved with that same quiet grace she had noticed yesterday, like someone accustomed to not drawing attention. Their eyes met across the store and recognition flickered in his expression. He touched the brim of his hat. "Miss Whitmore." "Mr. Young," she replied, pleased that her voice came out steady. "I trust Mr. Henderson was able to help your horse." "He was, thanks to your recommendation." Dawson approached, stopping at a respectful distance. "The roan is already improving. Henderson says you know more about horse medicine than most veterinarians he has met." Zelda felt a smile tug at her lips. "My father believed everyone should know how to care for animals properly. He taught me young. Your father was the sheriff before your brother," Henderson mentioned. "He was a good one." The old grief was a dull ache now rather than a sharp pain. Time had done its work, though she still missed her father's laugh and his patient way of explaining the world. Dawson's expression held understanding, the kind that came from personal loss. "I am sorry for your grief." The simple sincerity of it touched something in Zelda's chest. She nodded her thanks, then gestured to the shelves around them. "Are you finding what you need?" "Still figuring out what I can afford," he admitted with a wry twist of his mouth. "I need to find work first. Henderson mentioned the Sutton Ranch might be hiring." "They are," Zelda confirmed. "James Sutton lost 2 hands last month to the silver mines up in Leadville. He is a fair boss if you do your work and do not cause trouble." Dawson's gray eyes held hers. "I do my work and I do not cause trouble." She believed him, which was probably foolish. But there was something solid about Dawson Young, something that spoke of bedrock integrity beneath the worn clothes and trail dust. It was that quality, she realized, that had caught her attention yesterday. Not just his looks or his gentle handling of his horse, but something fundamental in his character that called to her. "The Sutton place is about 5 miles east," she told him. "If you are riding out that way, there is a shortcut through the creek valley that will save you time. But mind the water level, the snowmelt is still running high." "I appreciate the advice." He hesitated, then added, "You seem to know everyone and everything in this town." Zelda laughed softly. "That is what happens when you have lived somewhere all your life and your brother is the sheriff. People talk and I listen. Must be lonely sometimes, living in a place where everyone knows your business." The observation was surprisingly astute. Zelda studied him more closely, wondering what his story was. "It has its challenges," she admitted. "But it also means you always have help when you need it. That counts for something." The store owner, Mr. Reynolds, called out a greeting then, and Zelda made herself turn away to finish her shopping. But she was aware of Dawson moving through the store, selecting items carefully, counting his money with the economy of someone who had to make every dollar stretch. When she left, he was still comparing prices on dried beans, and she had to resist the urge to look back. 3 days passed before she saw him again. Zelda went about her usual routines, tending the house, helping at the church social, working in her small garden behind the house where she coaxed vegetables from the thin mountain soil. Thomas mentioned in passing that the drifter had hired on at the Sutton Ranch was proving to be a good hand, kept to himself mostly. He said it casually, but Zelda caught the sidelong look her brother gave her and knew he was watching for her reaction. She gave him none, just nodded and changed the subject. But on Saturday, when the ranch hands traditionally came into town for supplies and entertainment, Zelda found herself taking extra care with her appearance. She wore her good blue dress, the one that brought out her eyes, and actually spent time with her hair instead of just braiding it back like usual. When Thomas noticed and raised an eyebrow, she told him she was going to the church social that afternoon and wanted to look presentable. It was not exactly a lie. There was a social, and she was going. She just happened to take a route that led past the general store and the saloon first. Fairplay's main street was busy with Saturday traffic. Wagons lined the hitching posts, and men clustered in groups, talking livestock and weather and the latest news from Leadville's silver boom. Zelda exchanged greetings with various townsfolk, stopped to admire Mrs. Henderson's new baby, and somehow ended up standing outside the general store just as the Sutton Ranch hands rode in. Dawson was third in line, sitting easier in his saddle now, his horse moving sound and healthy. When he saw her, something lit in his expression, and he guided his roan over to where she stood. "Miss Whitmore," he said, dismounting with fluid grace. "It is good to see you, Mr. Young. I hear you have found employment." Up close, she could see that a few days of regular meals and solid sleep had filled out his face a little, eased some of the gauntness. He looked good, she thought, then immediately chided herself for noticing. "Thanks to your guidance." He tied his horse carefully. "The Sutton Ranch is good work. Hard but honest. James runs a tight operation. If he kept you on past the trial days, it means he trusts you." Dawson smiled, and it transformed his whole face, chasing away the weariness and revealing someone younger, lighter. "I've tried to prove worthy of that trust." They stood there for a moment, the busy street flowing around them, and Zelda was acutely aware of people watching. Fairplay was a small town, and the sheriff's sister talking to the new ranch hand would be noted, commented on, reported back to Thomas by nightfall. She should walk away. The sensible thing, the safe thing, was to nod politely and continue to the church. Instead, she heard herself say, "Are you going to the social this afternoon? Most of the town turns out. There will be music and food." Dawson's gray eyes searched her face. "I was thinking about it. I do not know many folks yet, though." "Then you should come," Zelda said, her heart beating faster than it had any right to. "It is a good way to meet people, make connections. Will you be there?" The question was simple, but the way he asked it, the quiet intensity in his gaze, made it feel like so much more. "Yes," Zelda said softly, "I will be there. Then I will definitely come." He said it like a promise. Zelda's breath caught. This was dangerous, this spark between them. Dangerous and foolish and probably doomed. But standing there in the spring sunshine, watching Dawson Young smile at her like she was the reason the sun was shining, she could not bring herself to care about sensible or safe. "I should go," she said, even though she did not want to. "I am helping to set up. I will see you this afternoon, then." Zelda nodded and made herself walk away, feeling his eyes on her back the whole distance to the church. Her hands were shaking slightly, and there was a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the way a drifting cowboy looked at her like she was something precious. The church social was held in the meadow behind the white clapboard building, long tables set up under the cottonwood trees, a space cleared for dancing. The whole town did turn out, as Zelda had promised, families and sweethearts and old-timers who just wanted to gossip and eat good food. Reverend Matthews said a blessing, and then the festivities began, fiddle music filling the air as children ran shrieking between the tables, and women laid out enough food to feed twice their number. Zelda helped serve, keeping busy, but part of her attention was always on the edge of the meadow watching for Dawson. Thomas stood with a group of men near the church, his badge catching the light, and she saw him watching her watch the road. Her brother knew her too well. Dawson arrived just as the first dance was starting, cleaned up even more than this morning, his hair still damp from washing. He stood at the meadow's edge looking uncertain until Zelda gathered her courage and crossed to him. "You came," she said, pleased. I said I would. His eyes traveled over her face, warm with appreciation. You look beautiful. Heat crept up Zelda's neck. She was not used to compliments, had never thought of herself as particularly pretty with her sun-browned skin and practical ways. Thank you. Come on, I will introduce you around. She led him through the crowd, making introductions, watching how he interacted with people. Dawson was quiet but not shy, respectful and well-spoken, and she saw the approval in the faces of the women and the measuring looks from the men. This was a community that valued hard work and good character, and Dawson seemed to instinctively understand the social dynamics. When the dancing started in earnest, several of the town's unmarried girls made their interest known, giggling and casting glances Dawson's way. Zelda felt an unfamiliar twist of jealousy watching pretty Sarah Mitchell flutter her eyelashes at him. Then Dawson turned to Zelda and held out his hand. Would you do me the honor, Miss Whitmore? Thomas was watching. Half the town was watching. Dancing with Dawson would be as good as announcing her interest to everyone in Fairplay. Zelda took his hand. I would be delighted, Mr. Young. His palm was calloused against hers, his grip strong and steady. He led her into the cleared space where other couples were already moving to the fiddle's bright tune. When he put his hand on her waist, even through the layers of fabric, she felt the warmth of his touch like a brand. They danced, and it felt like flying. Dawson moved well, confident without being showy, leading her through the steps with an easy grace that made her wonder where a drifting cowboy had learned to dance so well. She wanted to ask, wanted to know everything about him, but the music and movement made conversation difficult. So instead she let herself just enjoy this, the simple pleasure of dancing with a man who made her heart race. When the song ended, they stood there breathless and smiling at each other like fools, until Thomas materialized at Zelda's elbow. Mind if I have a word with Mr. Young? Her brother asked, his sheriff's voice firmly in place. Dawson released Zelda's hand, his expression going carefully neutral. Of course, Sheriff. Zelda wanted to protest, but Thomas was already steering Dawson away toward the edge of the meadow. She watched them go, anxiety knotting her stomach. Thomas could be intimidating when he wanted to be, and she had no doubt he was giving Dawson the standard big brother warning about keeping his intentions honorable. He is handsome, a voice said beside her. Martha Sullivan, who ran the boarding house, had appeared with 2 cups of lemonade. She offered one to Zelda with a knowing smile. And clearly taken with you. We barely know each other, Zelda protested weakly. Some things do not require much time. Martha sipped her drink, watching the 2 men talk. I have seen a lot of people come through my boarding house over the years. You learn to read folks. That young man has the look of someone who has found something worth staying for. Hope flared in Zelda's chest, bright and dangerous. He is a drifter, Martha. Thomas made sure to tell me that. Everyone is a drifter until they find a reason to settle. Martha patted her arm. Give him a chance, honey. I think he might surprise you. Before Zelda could respond, Thomas and Dawson returned. Her brother's expression was unreadable, but Dawson looked shaken in some fundamental way, his jaw tight. I will be heading back now, Dawson said to Zelda, his voice formal. Thank you for the dance, Miss Whitmore. It was a pleasure. He left before she could say anything, mounting his horse and riding out faster than seemed warranted. Zelda turned on her brother, anger rising hot and quick. What did you say to him? Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. Just made sure he understood the kind of woman you are, that you deserve respect and honest intentions. I am 23 years old, Thomas. I can decide for myself who deserves my attention. I know that. Her brother sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, Zell, I am not saying he is a bad man, but he has been here less than a week. We do not know anything about him, where he comes from, why he is running. You assume he is running from something. Everyone who pushes a horse that hard is running from something, Thomas said quietly. I just want you to be careful, that is all. The fight went out of Zelda as quickly as it had risen. Thomas meant well, even if he was overprotective. I am always careful, she said. But I am also tired of being alone because you have scared off every man who might be interested. Thomas winced. Is that what you think I do? It is what you do, Zelda said gently. I know you mean well, but I need to live my own life, Thomas. Make my own choices and my own mistakes if it comes to that. Her brother was quiet for a long moment, watching the dancers, the families, the whole peaceful scene spread out before them. I just do not want to lose you too, he finally said. After Ma and Pa, you are all the family I have left. Zelda's throat tightened. She leaned against her brother's shoulder, offering comfort. You will not lose me, but you have to let me take chances sometimes, even if they scare you. Thomas put his arm around her shoulders, and they stood like that while the music played on, and the sun moved lower in the sky, painting the mountains gold and purple. Whatever he had said to Dawson, Zelda knew she would have to deal with the fallout. But for now, she let herself take comfort in her brother's presence, and tried not to worry about the way Dawson had left so abruptly, like he was already halfway to drifting on. That night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the wind move through the cottonwoods, Zelda made a decision. She was done being careful, done letting fear of loss keep her from reaching for what she wanted. Dawson Young might be a drifter, might leave tomorrow or next week or next month. But he was also the first man in years who made her feel alive, who looked at her and saw not just the sheriff's sister but a woman worth knowing. She would take the chance. Whatever came of it, at least she would know she tried. The next morning after church, Zelda borrowed Thomas's horse and rode out to the Sutton Ranch. The ranch sprawled across a valley east of town, good grazing land surrounded by stands of aspen and pine. The main house was a sturdy log structure with a wide porch, outbuildings scattered around it in organized clusters. Zelda had been here many times over the years, knew the family well, but she still felt her stomach flutter with nerves as she approached. James Sutton himself was in the yard, a big man in his 50s with a weathered face and sharp eyes. He smiled when he saw her. Zelda Whitmore, this is a surprise. Your brother sent you to check up on my new hand. I came on my own business, Zelda said, dismounting. Is Mr. Young around? James's expression shifted into something between amusement and caution. He is out checking the fence line in the north pasture. Should be back within the hour if you want to wait. Zelda hesitated, suddenly unsure of her plan. What was she going to say when she saw him? Sorry my brother scared you off, but would you like to court me anyway? I will wait, she decided. James nodded toward the house. Emma is inside if you want company. She will be glad for the visit. Emma Sutton was a kind woman who had raised 4 children and still somehow maintained her energy and good humor. She welcomed Zelda with fresh coffee and cake, settling her at the kitchen table with the ease of long friendship. So, Emma said, her eyes twinkling, you are here to see young Dawson. There was no point in denying it. I am. Is that terribly forward of me? It is refreshing, Emma said firmly. That boy has been walking around here since yesterday looking like someone kicked his dog. James asked him about it this morning, and he said something about not wanting to cause trouble for anyone. I figured your brother had gotten to him. Thomas means well, Zelda said for what felt like the 100th time. Thomas is a good sheriff and a good man, but he needs to let you live your own life. Emma topped off Zelda's coffee. I have known you since you were in pigtails, honey. You have got a good head on your shoulders and a kind heart. If you have taken an interest in Dawson Young, there must be something there worth seeing. I barely know him, Zelda admitted, but there is something about him, Emma, something solid and true. I cannot explain it better than that. Some things do not need explaining. Emma smiled. When I met James, I knew within a day I was going to marry him. My parents thought I was crazy, said we needed a proper courtship. But when you know, you know. Before Zelda could respond, the sound of horses came from the yard. She stood, her heart suddenly pounding, and moved to the window. Dawson was dismounting near the barn, talking to one of the other hands, his posture relaxed. Then he glanced toward the house and froze, clearly recognizing her brother's horse. Zelda did not give herself time to think. She thanked Emma quickly and headed outside, her courage gathered like a shield. Dawson stood beside his horse, watching her approach with an expression she could not quite read. "Miss Whitmore," he said carefully, "I did not expect to see you here." "I came to talk to you," Zelda said, stopping a few feet away. "About yesterday, about what my brother said." Dawson looked away, his jaw tight. "Your brother was right to say what he did. You deserve better than some drifter with nothing to his name. Should I not be the judge of what I deserve?" His eyes snapped back to her face, surprise flickering there. "I do not want to cause you trouble." "Then do not run away," Zelda said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Stay, get to know me properly, let me get to know you, see if this feeling between us is real or just passing fancy." Dawson stared at her like she had just offered him the world. "Your brother would not approve." "My brother will have to learn to live with my choices." She stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, the way his throat moved as he swallowed hard. "I like you, Dawson Young. I do not know where you came from or why you are here, and I do not care. What I care about is that you are honest and kind and you look at me like I matter. That is rare enough that I am willing to take a chance on it. The question is whether you are willing to take a chance too." For a long moment he did not speak. Then slowly, almost reverently, he reached out and took her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. "I am not a good bet," he said quietly. "I have been moving for 2 years, never staying anywhere long. I do not have much to offer." "Why have you been moving?" Zelda asked. His expression darkened. "After the war, I went home to Texas. My family's ranch was barely holding on, and my father was drinking himself to death over losing my brother at Antietam. I tried to help, but he did not want help. Wanted to blame someone for James dying, and I was there, so I got the blame. We fought bad, and I left. Been working my way north ever since, trying to figure out who I am when I am not my father's disappointment or my dead brother's shadow." The pain in his words made Zelda's heart ache. "I am sorry about your brother." "Me too." Dawson's hand tightened on hers. "Point is, I have been running for so long I do not know if I remember how to stay. What if I let you down? What if your brother is right and I am just a drifter who will move on? What if you are not?" Zelda countered. "What if you just needed a reason to stop running?" He looked at her with such naked hope it stole her words. "Could you be that reason?" "I would like to try," she whispered. Dawson pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that made tears prick her eyes. "You are the best thing I have seen in 2 years of wandering," he said. "If you are really willing to give me a chance, I swear I will do everything I can to be worthy of it." "Just be yourself," Zelda said. "That is enough." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. Zelda melted into it, her hands gripping his shirt, and felt the world narrow down to just this. His mouth on hers, his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against her chest. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Dawson rested his forehead against hers. "Your brother is going to kill me." Zelda laughed, giddy and reckless. "Probably, but I will protect you." They stood there in the ranch yard, holding each other while the spring sun warmed their backs, and Emma Sutton watched from the kitchen window with a satisfied smile. Zelda knew there would be complications ahead. Knew Thomas would not be happy and the town would talk, and nothing about this was simple or easy. But right now, wrapped in Dawson Young's arms, she did not care about any of that. For the first time in years, she felt like her life was truly her own, stretching out before her full of possibility. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing affection. Dawson came into town every Saturday, always finding reasons to stop by wherever Zelda happened to be. They would talk for hours, about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams. He told her about growing up in Texas, about his mother who died when he was 12, about the war years and the hard times after. She told him about her childhood in Fairplay, about losing her parents, about the fierce love she had for this rough mountain town and the life she had built here. Thomas was not happy, as predicted. He watched their growing attachment with barely concealed disapproval, and made a point of being present whenever Dawson came around. But to his credit, he kept his word and let Zelda make her own choices, even if his jaw stayed tight with worry. "He is a good worker," James Sutton told Thomas one day when the sheriff stopped by the ranch on some pretext. "Honest, hardworking, does not complain. Whatever demons he was running from, I think he is done running." Thomas wanted to be reassured by that, Zelda could tell. But he was also scared of losing his sister, scared of the changes that were coming. She tried to be patient with him, tried to understand his fear even as she pushed forward toward what she wanted. What she wanted, increasingly, was Dawson Young. It was not just attraction, though there was plenty of that. It was the way he listened when she talked, really listened like her words mattered. It was his quiet strength and the gentleness he showed to animals and children. It was the way he had started to put down roots without seeming to realize it, learning the names of everyone in town, helping out at the church work days, slowly becoming part of the community. "This town needs a man like you," Zelda told him one evening as they sat on the porch of her house, Thomas strategically absent for once. Dawson looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" "Someone steady and capable who actually wants to be here, not just passing through on the way to something better." She shifted closer on the bench, taking his hand. "You fit here, Dawson. Can you feel it?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the mountains painted gold by the setting sun. "I have never fit anywhere before," he admitted. "Always felt like I was trying to squeeze into a space not quite the right shape. But here, with you, it is different. I wake up in the mornings and I am not thinking about where I need to go next. I am thinking about what needs doing on the ranch, whether I will see you on Saturday, what we might talk about. It is like I can finally breathe." Zelda's heart swelled. "Then stay," she said simply. "Not just for now." "Really stay?" "I want to," Dawson said, his voice rough with emotion. "God, Zelda, you do not know how much I want to, but I do not have anything to offer you. I am living in the ranch bunkhouse, spending half my wages just to keep my horse fed and my clothes patched. What kind of future is that?" "It is a starting place," Zelda said firmly. "My parents started with nothing but each other and a borrowed wagon. They built a good life. We can too if we work at it." Dawson turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. "You would really tie yourself to a cowboy with empty pockets and a borrowed saddle." "I would tie myself to you," she corrected. "The rest is just details we will figure out together." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his hope and fear and desperate wanting into it. Zelda kissed him back with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his hair, and thought that she had never been more certain of anything in her life. When they finally broke apart, Both breathing hard, Dawson pressed his face into her neck. "I love you," he whispered against her skin. "I did not mean to, did not plan on it, but I do. I love you so much it scares me." Joy burst through Zelda like fireworks. "I love you too," she said, the words coming easy as breathing. "I have loved you since you first smiled at me, I think. Certainly since you danced with me at the social." They held each other as the sun finished setting and the stars began to emerge, brilliant in the thin mountain air. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and the wind carried the scent of pine and coming summer. Zelda thought about all the moments that had led to this one, all the choices and chances and small miracles that had brought a drifting cowboy to her door. "We should probably tell your brother," Dawson said eventually. "Properly, I mean, ask his blessing." "He will say no," Zelda warned. "Then I will keep asking until he says yes." Dawson pulled back to look at her, his expression determined. "I am going to marry you, Zelda Whitmore. However long it takes, whatever I have to do to prove myself, that is my intention. You should know that up front." Zelda smiled, wide and bright. "Good, because that is my intention too." They sat on the porch until full dark, making plans and promises, building a future out of words and hopes. When Dawson finally left to ride back to the ranch, Zelda stayed outside, too full of happiness to go inside yet. She was still sitting there when Thomas came home, dismounting his horse with tired movements. Her brother saw her and paused. "He is gone already, just left." Zelda patted the bench beside her. "Sit with me a minute." Thomas settled beside her with a sigh, stretching out his long legs. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the town settling down for sleep. "He is going to ask for your blessing," Zelda said eventually, "to court me properly with the intention of marriage." She felt Thomas stiffen beside her. "That is fast." "We are both old enough to know our minds," Zelda said. "And I know mine. I love him, Thomas. Really, truly love him. He makes me happy in a way I did not think I could be." Thomas was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "After Ma died, you took care of everything. The house, the cooking, me. You were just 17 and you became the mother, the housekeeper, the one who held everything together. I do not think I ever thanked you properly for that." "You do not need to thank me," Zelda said softly. "You are my brother, I love you, I know. And I love you too, which is why this is so hard." Thomas rubbed his face. "I want you to be happy, Zell, I do, but I am also terrified of you getting hurt. What if he leaves? What if he is not who we think he is? What if I say yes and then I have to watch you suffer?" "Those are all real possibilities," Zelda acknowledged. "But what if none of those things happen? What if he stays and we build a good life and I get to be truly happy? Are you going to deny me that because you are afraid of what might go wrong?" Thomas turned to look at her, and in the dim light from the house windows she could see the struggle on his face. "You really love him that much?" "I really do." Her brother took a deep breath, let it out slowly. "Then when he asks, I will say yes. But I swear, Zelda, if he hurts you, there is not a place on this earth he can run to where I will not find him." Relief and love flooded through her. Zelda threw her arms around Thomas's neck, hugging him tight. Thank you for trusting me." Thomas hugged her back, his arms strong and safe like they had been all her life. "Just promise me you will still make Sunday dinner sometimes after you are married. I cannot cook worth a damn and I will starve without you." Zelda laughed through the tears that were suddenly streaming down her face. "I promise." They sat together on the porch, brother and sister, holding onto each other as the night deepened around them. Somewhere out at the Sutton Ranch, Dawson was probably lying in his bunk thinking about her. And tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days stretching forward, they would work toward building a life together. It was not going to be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But Zelda had never been afraid of hard work, and she was not about to start now. The courtship was proper and public, Dawson coming to dinner every Sunday, sitting stiffly at the table while Thomas asked pointed questions about his intentions, and Zelda tried not to laugh at how nervous her cowboy got. But slowly, grudgingly, Thomas began to warm to him. It was hard not to when Dawson was so obviously sincere, so clearly devoted to Zelda, so willing to work for every scrap of approval. The town accepted them too, the initial gossip giving way to genuine affection for the drifter who had settled into their community like he had always belonged. Dawson helped old Mr. Peterson rebuild his pig pen, stronger this time. He taught the boys in town to shoot properly, patient and safety-focused in a way that impressed their parents. He showed up for every church work day and town gathering, quiet but present, building connections that turned into friendships. "You were right," Martha Sullivan told Zelda one day at the general store. "He found his reason to stay." Zelda smiled, watching through the window as Dawson helped load supplies into a widow's wagon, refusing payment despite her protests. "I think the town adopted him as much as he chose us." "It is a two-way street," Martha agreed. This place needed some fresh blood, someone who chose to be here instead of just being stuck here. He reminds people why Fairplay is worth staying in. As spring turned to summer, Dawson saved every penny he could spare, working extra hours and taking on side jobs. Zelda knew what he was saving for, could see the determination in the set of his shoulders. She did not push or ask, just waited, because some things had to happen in their own time. The proposal came in August, on a golden afternoon when the aspen leaves were just starting to think about turning. Dawson had asked her to go riding, and they had made their way up into the hills above town, to a spot where you could see the whole valley spread out below, the town a neat cluster of buildings surrounded by endless mountains. They dismounted and stood at the overlook, and Dawson was quiet for so long that Zelda started to wonder if something was wrong. Then he turned to her, taking both her hands, and she saw that he was nervous in a way she had never seen before. "I have been thinking about what you said," he began. "About this town needing a man like me, about me fitting here." He paused, gathering his words. "For 2 years I wandered around feeling like I did not have a place in the world, like I had lost my chance at happiness when I rode away from Texas. And then I came here, half dead from exhaustion and running on empty, and you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth something." Zelda's throat tightened with emotion. "You are worth everything. You made me believe that," Dawson said. "You and this town and the life I have been building here. For the first time since before the war, I feel like I have a purpose, like I am home." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small box. "So I am asking you, Zelda Whitmore, if you will marry me. I do not have much to offer yet, but I am working on it. James has offered me a foreman position come fall with a house on the property. It is not big, but it is solid and there is good land around it. We could build something there together. Raise a family, grow old, have the kind of life my parents had before the war broke everything." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small but beautiful sapphire, the blue matching her eyes. Zelda's vision blurred with tears. "It is not much," Dawson said anxiously. "But the jeweler in Leadville said sapphires mean faithfulness, and I wanted you to know that is what I am offering. My faith, my loyalty, my whole heart for the rest of my life." "It is perfect," Zelda whispered. "You are perfect. And yes, Dawson Young, I will absolutely marry you." The joy that broke over his face was like sunrise. He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a promise and a celebration all at once. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Dawson spun her around, making her squeal. "You just made me the happiest man alive," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms tight around her. "Good." Zelda wiped her tears, unable to stop smiling. "Because you have made me the happiest woman. We are going to have such a good life, Dawson. I can feel it." They stayed up on the mountain until the sun started to set, making plans. They would marry in the fall after the harvest, when the work on the ranch slowed down a bit. A simple wedding in the church, with the whole town invited. They would move into the foreman's house and start building their life together, working side by side the way Zelda's parents had. "How many children do you want?" Dawson asked, his hand resting on her waist as they watched the sky turn colors. "At least 3, Zelda said. "I hated being an only child before Thomas was born. I want a house full of voices and laughter." 3 sounds good." Dawson kissed her temple. 2 boys and a girl, maybe. "Or however they come, as long as they are healthy and have your spirit." "And your kindness," Zelda added, leaning into him. They rode back to town in the twilight, their hands linked, already functioning as a unit. Thomas was waiting on the porch when they arrived, and one look at their faces told him everything he needed to know. "So he asked," her brother said, something complicated in his expression. "And I said yes." Zelda held up her hand, showing the ring. Thomas studied the sapphire for a long moment, then looked at Dawson. "You treat her right, you hear me? She is the best person I know, and if you do even one thing to dim that light in her eyes, you will answer to me." "I know," Dawson said seriously. "And I will treat her like the treasure she is. You have my word, Sheriff, on my life." The 2 men looked at each other, and something passed between them, some understanding that did not need words. Then Thomas stuck out his hand and Dawson shook it, and the deal was sealed. "I guess I should say congratulations," Thomas said gruffly, "and welcome to the family, such as it is." Zelda hugged her brother hard. "Thank you for giving us your blessing. It means the world." Thomas's arms tightened around her. "You are still making Sunday dinner, right?" "I meant what I said about starving." Everyone laughed, and the tension broke. They went inside together, the 3 of them, and sat at the kitchen table while Zelda made coffee and they discussed wedding plans and the future. It felt right, Zelda thought, like pieces clicking into place. Her past and her future, sitting at the same table, learning to be a family. The months between the engagement and the wedding were busy ones. Zelda sewed her dress with help from the town's women, simple white muslin with lace at the collar and cuffs. Dawson and James worked on fixing up the foreman's house, replacing worn floorboards and patching the roof, making it ready for a family. Thomas tried to be supportive while clearly struggling with the reality of his sister leaving, and Zelda did her best to reassure him that she was not going far, would still be in his life. The whole town seemed invested in the wedding. Mrs. Henderson organized the food. Reverend Matthews agreed to perform the ceremony at a reduced fee, saying young love should be encouraged. Even old Mr. Peterson offered to play his fiddle for the dancing afterward, despite his arthritis. "You have really become part of this place," Zelda told Dawson one evening as they walked through town together, her hand tucked into his arm. "Everyone here cares about you." "They care about you," Dawson corrected. "I am just lucky enough to come with the package." "No," Zelda said firmly. "They care about you for yourself. You have earned that, Dawson, by being the kind of man worth caring about." He pulled her into a quiet corner, away from the street, and kissed her in that way that made her forget everything else. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "Cannot wait until you are my wife and I get to wake up next to you every morning." "Only a few more weeks," Zelda reminded him, though she was just as impatient. The waiting felt endless, but finally October arrived, bringing crisp air and golden aspen leaves in their wedding day. Zelda woke to sunshine streaming through her window and allowed herself a moment of pure excitement before the day's activities swept her up. The women of the town descended on the house, helping her dress, fixing her hair, exclaiming over how beautiful she looked. Thomas knocked on her door just before it was time to leave for the church. He stood in the doorway, looking at her with such raw emotion that Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. "You look just like Ma," he said hoarsely. "She would be so proud of you." "Do not make me cry," Zelda warned. "I will ruin my face." Thomas crossed to her, taking her hands carefully. "I know I have been difficult about this, about Dawson, but I want you to know that I do see how happy he makes you, how good you are together, and I am grateful to him for that, even if it is hard to let you go." "You are not letting me go," Zelda said, squeezing his hands. "I am just expanding my life, not leaving you behind. You will always be my brother, always be important to me, I know." Thomas cleared his throat. "But you are about to become someone's wife, start your own family. Things are going to change." "Some things," Zelda agreed, "but not the important things, not how much I love you." Her brother pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of her dress. They stood like that for a moment, just being brother and sister one more time before everything shifted. Then Thomas offered his arm, and they walked together to the church. The building was packed, every pew filled with townspeople who had come to celebrate. Flowers decorated the altar, autumn wildflowers and branches of golden aspen that turned the space into something magical. And at the front, standing beside Reverend Matthews, was Dawson. He had borrowed a suit from James Sutton, had his hair freshly cut, but what struck Zelda was the expression on his face. Pure, unfiltered joy mixed with a reverence that made her breath catch. He looked at her like she was a miracle walking toward him. Thomas led her down the aisle, every step feeling momentous. When they reached the front, her brother placed her hand in Dawson's, and the contact sent warmth flooding through her. "Take care of her," Thomas said quietly. "With my life," Dawson promised. The ceremony was simple and beautiful, traditional vows spoken with such sincerity they felt new-minted. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife and Dawson kissed her, the whole church erupted in applause. Zelda laughed against her new husband's mouth, giddy with happiness. They walked out into the October sunshine as man and wife, and the celebration began. Tables had been set up in the churchyard despite the cool weather, laden with enough food to feed twice their number. The fiddle music started, and soon everyone was dancing, the whole town swept up in the joy of the day. Dawson never let go of Zelda's hand, keeping her close as they moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes. When the dancing started in earnest, he swept her into his arms just like that first day at the spring social, and Zelda thought about how far they had come since then. From strangers to this, bound together by love and promise and the life they were going to build. "What are you thinking about?" Dawson asked, reading her expression. "Everything," Zelda said. "How lucky I am, how right this feels." "I am the lucky one," Dawson insisted. "You could have married anyone, some rich man from Denver, someone who could give you an easy life. But you chose a drifting cowboy with nothing but worn boots and a good work ethic." Zelda reached up to touch his face. "I chose the man I love. Everything else is just details." They danced until the sun started to set, until the children were falling asleep on blankets, and the old folks were heading home. Finally, with much teasing and advice from the married couples, they said their goodbyes and rode out to the Sutton Ranch together. The foreman's house stood ready for them, a fire already laid in the hearth, candles lit on the table. Someone, probably Emma Sutton, had left fresh flowers in a vase and a meal waiting under covers. It was not much by most standards, just a small wooden house with basic furniture and a good stove. But walking through the door with Dawson, Zelda thought it was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. "Welcome home, Mrs. Young," Dawson said, closing the door behind them. Mrs. Young. Zelda tested the name in her mind and found she loved it. She turned to her husband, suddenly nervous despite everything. "I cannot believe we are really married. Believe it." Dawson crossed to her, his hands gentle on her waist. "You are mine now, and I am yours for the rest of our lives." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Zelda let herself sink into it, all her nerves melting away. This was Dawson, the man she loved, and everything between them felt natural and right. She kissed him back with growing confidence, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. "I love you," she whispered when they finally broke apart for air. "I love you too," Dawson said. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." They stood in their new home, holding each other as the last light faded from the sky and their married life together truly began. Outside, the October wind moved through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and coming winter. But inside, wrapped in Dawson's arms, Zelda felt only warmth and safety and a happiness so complete it took her breath away. That night marked the true beginning of their life together. The days and weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both new and somehow ancient, like they were following patterns laid down by generations before them. Dawson would rise before dawn to start his work on the ranch, and Zelda would wake with him, making breakfast while the sun came up over the mountains. They would eat together, talking about the day ahead, stealing kisses in between bites of food. The work was hard, as all ranch work was. Dawson threw himself into his new role as foreman with the same quiet determination he brought to everything, earning the respect of the hands and the trust of James Sutton. Zelda kept their home, tending her garden and the chickens they had acquired, learning to cook for one person instead of two when Dawson had to be out overnight checking on the far pastures. But the hard work was good, felt meaningful in a way that went beyond just survival. They were building something together, a life and a home, and eventually, they hoped, a family. Every meal shared, every evening spent talking by the fire, every night falling asleep in each other's arms was another brick in the foundation of their marriage. Thomas came to visit regularly, awkward at first about intruding on the newlyweds, but gradually relaxing into his new role as brother-in-law. He and Dawson developed an easy friendship, going hunting together sometimes, discussing town business and the politics of managing a community on the edge of civilization. Watching them, Zelda felt a deep contentment. Her two favorite people, learning to care about each other. Winter came early that year, snow falling in November and not stopping until April. It was a hard season, the kind that tested everyone, but Zelda and Dawson weathered it together. They spent the long evenings reading aloud to each other, planning for the spring, dreaming about the future. Dawson taught Zelda to play chess with a set James had given them as a wedding present. Zelda taught Dawson to bake bread, laughing at his first attempts that came out hard as rocks. "We will survive this winter," she would tell him on the hardest days, when the snow piled so deep it buried the fences and the cold was a physical presence. "And next winter and all the winters after, together." "Together," Dawson would echo, holding her close. When spring finally arrived, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but waited to be sure before telling Dawson. The night she finally told him, he looked at her with such wonder and joy that she fell in love with him all over again. "A baby," he breathed, his hand tentatively touching her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Zelda asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it." Dawson pulled her into his lap, careful even though there was nothing to be careful of yet. "You are giving me a family, Zelda. A real family, not like the broken thing I left behind in Texas. I do not have words for what that means to me." They sat together in the gathering dusk, making plans for this new life they had created. They would need to add onto the house before winter, make space for a nursery. They would need to save money for a cradle, for baby clothes, for all the supplies a child required. But more than the practical concerns, they talked about what kind of parents they wanted to be. Patient and kind, firm but loving. They wanted to raise children who felt safe and valued, who grew up knowing they were wanted. "This town is a good place to raise a family," Zelda said, thinking of the community that had embraced them both. "Good schools, good people." "The best," Dawson agreed. "Our children are going to be so loved not just by us but by everyone here." He was right. When news of the pregnancy spread through Fairplay, the whole town seemed to celebrate with them. Emma Sutton brought over baby clothes her own children had outgrown. Martha Sullivan promised to help with the birth, having assisted dozens over her years running the boarding house. Even old Mr. Peterson whittled a set of toy animals for the baby, starting months early so he could make them perfect. "This town needs a man like you," Zelda told Dawson again one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset. "Someone who invests in the community, who makes people want to stay and build something lasting." Dawson looked puzzled. "I have not done anything special." "Yes, you have." Zelda took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You came here a stranger with nothing, and you worked hard and treated people with respect and became part of the fabric of this place. You showed other people it is possible to start over, to build something new. That matters more than you know." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I was thinking maybe we should buy some land. Not much, just a small piece. Somewhere we could build our own place eventually, have room to grow. What do you think?" Hope flared in Zelda's chest. "I think that sounds perfect. Do you have somewhere in mind?" "There is a parcel about a mile north of here, up against the foothills. Good water, nice views. The owner is looking to sell, move back east to live with his daughter. I have been saving, and with what we have put away it might be enough for a down payment." They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming. It felt impossibly ambitious, buying land and building a house while expecting their first child. But it also felt right, like they were claiming their place in the world, putting down roots so deep nothing could dislodge them. By midsummer, they had bought the land. 10 acres of prime Colorado real estate with a creek running through it and stands of aspen that would turn gold come autumn. They spent every spare moment there, Dawson starting to clear space for a house while Zelda planned the garden she would plant. It was exhausting work, especially with her pregnancy advancing, but it was also thrilling to see their dreams taking physical shape. Thomas helped when he could, bringing friends to assist with the heavy lifting. James Sutton gave Dawson time off to work on the property, understanding that a man needed to provide for his growing family. The whole town seemed invested in their success, offering advice and labor and supplies at good prices. "You have got a good thing here," Martha Sullivan told Zelda one day at the store, watching as Zelda selected fabric for curtains. "A good man, a good home, a baby on the way. You should be proud of what you have built." "I am," Zelda said softly, one hand resting on her swollen belly. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life, that I get to have all this." "You deserve it," Martha said firmly. "Both of you do. After everything you have both been through, the losses and the hard times, you have earned this happiness." In September, as the aspen trees began their transformation, Zelda gave birth to a son. The labor was hard, lasting through most of a day and into the night, But when Martha finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Zelda thought she had never seen anything so beautiful. Dawson, who had been pacing outside like a caged animal, was finally allowed in to meet his son. He approached the bed with reverence, looking at the tiny bundle in Zelda's arms like he was witnessing a miracle. "He is perfect," Dawson whispered, touching one impossibly small hand with a finger. The baby's fist closed around it, and Zelda watched her husband's face crumple with emotion. "Hello, little one. I am your papa." "We need to name him," Zelda said, exhausted but happy. They had discussed names for months, never quite agreeing on one. But looking at her son's face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, Zelda knew what she wanted to call him. "Jacob," she said. "After your brother, so a part of him lives on." Dawson's head snapped up, his eyes shining with tears. "Are you sure? You do not have to do that, I am sure." Zelda touched his face. "Your brother was a hero, and his memory deserves to be honored. Plus, I think it might help heal some of those old wounds with your father, if he ever wants to reach out to meet his grandson." "I love you so much," Dawson said roughly. "Both of you, my family." Thomas came to visit the next day, looking uncomfortable and awed in equal measure as he held his nephew for the first time. "He looks like you," he told Dawson. "Poor kid." Everyone laughed, and the tension broke. Thomas was surprisingly gentle with the baby, and Zelda saw the longing in her brother's face. He wanted this too, she realized. A family of his own, children to love. Maybe someday, when he stopped being so focused on his duties and opened himself to possibility. The months after Jacob's birth were exhausting and wonderful. Zelda had never worked so hard or slept so little, but she also had never been happier. Watching Dawson with their son, seeing the gentle way he held the baby and the awe in his eyes every time Jacob smiled, filled her heart to bursting. "I never knew I could love like this," Dawson told her one night, rocking Jacob while Zelda finally got a chance to rest. "It is different from how I love you, but just as strong. I would do anything to keep him safe." "I know," Zelda said, watching her two favorite people from the bed. "You are a wonderful father, Dawson, better than you probably believe." Work on their house continued through the fall, slower now with a baby to care for but still progressing. By the time winter arrived, they had a foundation laid and the frame started. It was enough to let them see the shape of their future home, to imagine the life they would lead there. "Next year," Dawson promised, standing with Zelda in front of the rising structure, Jacob bundled against the cold between them. "Next year we will be living here in our own place." "I cannot wait," Zelda said, leaning into her husband's warmth. Winter was easier this year, even with a baby. They knew what to expect, were better prepared for the isolation and the cold. Jacob was a relatively easy baby, healthy and happy, charming everyone who met him. Thomas was a devoted uncle, visiting regularly and spoiling his nephew shamelessly. Emma Sutton taught Zelda tricks for managing both a baby and household work. The whole community wrapped around the young family like a protective blanket. Spring brought its usual madness of work, but also progress on the house. With help from friends and hired workers, the structure went up quickly once the weather allowed. By summer, they had a roof and walls, windows and doors. The inside was still rough, needing finishes and fixtures, but it was undeniably a home. They moved in on a sunny day in July, Thomas and James helping to haul their modest possessions up the road. Jacob, now nearly a year old and starting to walk, toddled around the empty rooms with delight while Zelda and Dawson unpacked. "It is really ours," Zelda said that night, standing on their porch and looking out at the land they owned. "This house, this property, this life. No one can take it from us." Dawson wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "I still have trouble believing it sometimes. 2 years ago I was wandering aimless, half dead from exhaustion and completely lost. Now I have you and Jacob in this place. It is more than I ever let myself dream about. You deserve it, Zelda said, turning in his arms. You worked for it, earned it with your integrity and your determination. Be proud of what you have accomplished. We have accomplished, Dawson corrected. None of this happens without you, Zelda. You are the one who saw something worthwhile in a drifting cowboy. You are the one who told me this town needed me, made me believe I could have this kind of life. Everything good I have is because of you. They kissed as the sun set over their land, their baby sleeping peacefully inside their home, and Zelda thought about how much can change in 2 years. How a chance encounter can alter the entire trajectory of a life. How love can transform loss into hope. The years that followed were full and rich. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah who inherited Zelda's stubborn determination, and another son they named Peter who was quiet and thoughtful like his father. The house grew along with the family. Rooms added as needed. The property improved with each passing season. Dawson became one of the most respected men in Fairplay, known for his fair dealing and his willingness to help anyone who needed it. He served on the town council, helped build the new school, mediated disputes with Solomon-like wisdom. He never forgot what it felt like to be an outsider, and that empathy made him someone people trusted. Zelda found her own place in the community, beyond just being the sheriff's sister or the cowboy's wife. She started a lending library in their home, collecting books and loaning them out to anyone who wanted to read. She taught reading to children whose parents were illiterate. She organized work parties to help families in need, and became the person people came to when they needed advice or just someone to listen. Thomas eventually married a widow named Grace who moved to town with her young daughter. Watching her brother fall in love was a joy for Zelda, especially seeing how happy he became with a family of his own. Their children grew up as close as siblings. The 2 families intertwined in the way of people who chose to be family rather than just sharing blood. The town grew too, slowly but steadily. More families settled in the valley, drawn by good land and the tight-knit community. A proper school was built, then a new church, then a hotel for the increasing number of visitors passing through. Fairplay evolved from a rough mining town into a real community, a place where people put down roots and built lasting lives. Through it all, Dawson and Zelda remained at the center of each other's worlds. The intense passion of their early love mellowed into something deeper and more sustainable, but no less powerful. They were partners in every sense, sharing the work and the decisions and the dreams for their future. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Dawson took Zelda back up to the mountain overlook where he had proposed. The children were with Thomas and Grace for the evening, giving them a rare chance to be alone together. 10 years, Dawson said, standing with his arm around Zelda's waist as they looked out over the valley. Their house was visible in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney, and beyond it the town where their life together had begun. A decade since you changed my life. We changed each other's lives, Zelda corrected. I was stuck too in my own way, taking care of Thomas, living the same safe routine year after year. You made me brave enough to reach for what I wanted. Do you ever regret it? Dawson asked. Taking a chance on a stranger. Sometimes I wonder if you could have had an easier life with someone else. Zelda turned to face him fully. Easier, maybe, but not better. Not fuller or richer or more filled with love. You gave me everything I wanted, Dawson. A true partnership, a real home, children I adore, a life that matters. What more could I possibly want? I just want to make sure you are happy, he said. That is all I have ever wanted. I am so happy, Zelda assured him, Every single day, even the hard ones, I wake up grateful that you rode into town that spring afternoon, that your horse went lame and you stayed long enough for us to find each other. It was the best stroke of luck either of us ever had." They kissed as the sun set, just like they had so many times before, and Zelda thought about all the ways love could manifest. The grand gestures and the quiet moments, the daily choosing of each other and the big decisions made together. It was all love, all part of the tapestry they were weaving with their lives. More years passed, their children growing from babies to young people with dreams of their own. Jacob showed an interest in ranching, often spending time with his father learning the business. Sarah wanted to be a teacher, spending hours with Zelda and the borrowed books, soaking up knowledge. Peter was drawn to art, sketching the mountains and animals with surprising talent. "We did good," Dawson told Zelda one evening, watching their children play in the yard. "Look at them. They are confident and kind, and they know they are loved. That is everything." "We did very good," Zelda agreed, leaning into her husband's side. Thomas and Grace's family grew too, eventually including 3 more children. The two families remained close, their homes always open to each other, their lives deeply intertwined. Holidays were loud, chaotic affairs with children everywhere and laughter echoing off the walls. It was nothing like the quiet, lonely existence Zelda had once imagined for herself. The town continued to thrive, though not without challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, economic downturns and personal tragedies. But the community Dawson and Zelda had helped build weathered it all, people pulling together in times of trouble, celebrating together in times of joy. When Dawson was in his early 50s, a letter arrived from Texas. His father had passed away, and his sister was writing to inform him and to extend an invitation to visit if he was ever inclined. She mentioned that their father had spoken of Dawson at the end, expressing regret for the way things had ended between them. Dawson held the letter for a long time, emotions playing across his face. Zelda waited, letting him process in his own time. "He never met his grandchildren," Dawson finally said. "Never knew Jacob was named for James, never knew I had this life. All because of pride and stubbornness on both our parts. You cannot change the past," Zelda said gently, "but you could reach out to your sister. Let her meet her nieces and nephews. Build something new even if you cannot repair what was broken." Dawson looked at her, gratitude in his eyes. "What would I do without you? Fortunately, you will never have to find out." They made the trip to Texas the following spring, the whole family traveling by train in an adventure the children talked about for months. Meeting Dawson's sister, seeing the ranch where he grew up, gave Zelda a deeper understanding of the man her husband had become. The wounds of the past did not magically heal, but some peace was made. Connections were forged between the cousins. Dawson's sister cried when she met Jacob, seeing her lost brother in his face. "Thank you for giving him a family," she told Zelda. "For giving him a reason to heal and move forward. Our family was broken by the war and its aftermath, but you helped him build something new." "He is easy to love," Zelda said simply. They returned to Colorado with a sense of closure, of circles completed. Dawson seemed lighter afterward, like he had finally put down a weight he had been carrying for decades. The children grew up and started lives of their own. Jacob married a rancher's daughter and took over management of the Sutton place when James retired. Sarah became a teacher as she had dreamed, eventually running the school. Peter moved to Denver to pursue his art, but came home regularly, never losing his connection to the mountains and the family that had nurtured his talent. Dawson and Zelda found themselves alone again after years of a full house, and they discovered they still enjoyed, each other's company as much as they had in the beginning. They took long walks across their land, worked together in the garden, sat on the porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. "We are growing old," Zelda said one evening, looking at their joined hands. Both were weathered now, marked by years of hard work but still fitting together perfectly. "Growing old together," Dawson corrected. "Exactly like we planned. No regrets." He looked at her, this woman who had changed his entire life, and smiled. "Not a single one." "You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, Zelda Young. Every day with you is a gift." They sat on their porch watching the sun set over their land, the town visible in the distance, their children's homes scattered around the valley. This was the life they had built together from nothing but hope and hard work and an abundance of love. It was a good life, a full life, a life worth living. Years later, when they were both well into their 70s, Dawson became ill. The sickness came on gradually, stealing his strength bit by bit, until he spent most of his days in the chair by the window, looking out at the land he loved. Zelda tended him with the same devotion she had shown their children, and Dawson bore the indignity of decline with quiet grace. "I am ready," he told her one evening as the light faded and their children gathered in the house around them. "I've had a good life, better than I deserved. I am not afraid." "I am," Zelda admitted, holding his hand. "I do not know how to be without you." Dawson squeezed her fingers with what strength he had left. "You will be fine. You are the strongest person I know, and I will be waiting for you when your time comes. We will be together again." He passed peacefully in his sleep that night, surrounded by family, in the home they had built together. The town mourned him as one of their own, remembering the drifting cowboy who had become a pillar of the community. They spoke of his kindness and his integrity, his dedication to family and his willingness to help anyone in need. Zelda grieved deeply, but not hopelessly. She knew how lucky she had been to have 50 years with the love of her life. Not everyone got that, got to grow old with their person, got to build a life so full and rich and meaningful. She had loved Dawson Young from the moment she saw him, and she would love him until she drew her last breath and beyond. She lived another 5 years, spending them surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, watching the family she and Dawson had created flourish and grow. She told stories about their early days, about the drifting cowboy who had come to town with nothing and built an empire of love. She made sure their grandchildren knew where they came from, the legacy of hard work and integrity that Dawson had established. On a spring morning much like the one when she had first seen Dawson, Zelda passed away in her sleep. She was buried beside her husband on a hill overlooking their land, with a view of both the mountains and the town below. The whole community came to the service, 3 generations of people whose lives had been touched by the couple who had helped build Fairplay into more than just a town, but a real home. The story of Sheriff's sister who fell for the drifting cowboy became part of Fairplay's history, told and retold as an example of what was possible when people chose to see the best in each other. Their children carried on their legacy, continuing to invest in the community, to help their neighbors, to live with integrity and kindness. The house Dawson built still stood generations later, maintained by the family, a monument to what could be accomplished with love and determination. The land they had worked so hard to acquire remained in the family, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. And in the town cemetery, beneath the mountains they both loved, Dawson and Zelda Young rested side by side, together for eternity just as they had been in life. Their simple headstones bore the dates of their lives and a single inscription chosen by their children. Together they built a life worth living. It was a fitting epitaph for a love that had transformed two lonely people into a family, a drifter into a community leader, a small town into a home. It was a love story for the ages, proving that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances on strangers, from believing in possibilities, from being brave enough to reach for what you want even when the outcome is uncertain. The town of Fairplay, Colorado, continued to grow and change over the decades and centuries that followed, but the spirit that Dawson and Zelda had helped foster remained. It was still a place where newcomers were welcomed, where hard work was valued, where community mattered more than individual gain. It was still a place where love stories began, where families were built, where people came to start over and found they could succeed. And sometimes, on spring evenings when the light hit just right, people walking past the old Young place swore they could see two figures on the porch, sitting close together, watching the sunset over the mountains they had loved. It was probably just a trick of the light, just shadows and imagination. But it was a nice thought regardless, that love like theirs could echo through time, a reminder that the best stories never really end. They just become part of the land, part of the history, part of the foundation that future generations build upon. Dawson and Zelda Young had come to Fairplay as individuals seeking something they could not name. They had found each other, had found home, had found purpose and meaning and a love that lasted beyond death itself. It was everything they had hoped for and more than they had dared to dream. It was the life they had chosen, the life they had built together one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.